There's something subtle, almost invisible, that begins to happen as a man matures, something most people can feel but very few can explain. It's not loud, it's not performative, and it doesn't beg for recognition. It's presence. And if you're still a highly attractive older man, this is one of the clearest signs you command attention without ever needing to ask for it. Now, this isn't about walking into a room and trying to dominate it. In fact, the more a man tries to dominate a room, the more he exposes his need for validation. What we're talking about here is the opposite. It's the ability to walk into any environment and remain completely grounded in who you are. No rush to impress. No urgency to prove. No silent plea for approval. Just a calm, centered awareness that says, I know my value, and I don't need to announce it. Psychologically, this kind of presence signals something very powerful. It communicates certainty, and certainty is one of the most attractive emotional experiences a woman can feel around a man. Because when a man is certain in himself, he becomes emotionally predictable in the best way. Not boring, but stable. Safe without being soft. Strong without being aggressive. Women notice this immediately, even if they can't articulate it. They feel it in the way you hold eye contact. Not staring, not avoiding, just steady. They sense it in your body language. Relaxed, not rigid. Open, not guarded. They hear it in your voice, measured, not rushed. These are not techniques. These are byproducts of a man who has done the internal work. And that's the key distinction. This level of presence cannot be faked for long. It's not a trick you learn. It's a result you become. It comes from years of experiences that forced you to confront yourself, wins that built your confidence, losses that humbled you, moments where life didn't go your way, but you adapted instead of collapsing. Over time, all of that creates a man who no longer needs constant external reinforcement to feel whole. You see, younger men often believe attraction is about doing more, saying more, showing more, trying harder. But as you grow, you realize something counterintuitive. Attraction often comes from doing less, but being more present, more aware, more in control of your energy, and energy is what people respond to first, long before logic enters the equation. You can say all the right words, but if your energy feels uncertain, it creates doubt. On the other hand, you can say very little, but if your presence feels grounded, it creates curiosity. Women start leaning in, not because you demanded attention, but because your silence invited it. There's also a level of emotional independence here that becomes incredibly attractive. You're not overly reactive to how others perceive you. Compliments don't inflate your ego, and criticism doesn't shatter your confidence. You take both in stride. That kind of emotional balance is rare, and rarity always increases value. But let's be clear, this isn't about becoming detached or indifferent. It's about being self-contained. You can engage, connect, even care deeply, but you're not dependent. You're choosing the interaction, not clinging to it. And that choice, that freedom, is what creates real magnetism. When a man reaches this stage, something shifts in how he experiences the world. He stops chasing attention and starts attracting it. Conversations come to him. Opportunities come to him. And yes, women notice him not because he's trying to be noticed, but because there's something authentic about him that stands out in a world full of performance. So if you recognize this in yourself, understand what it really means. It means you've moved beyond need to be seen and stepped into the power of simply being. And that's where true attraction begins. Because at the end of the day, the man who needs the least validation often commands the most attention. One of the most defining traits of a highly attractive older man is something most people underestimate, yet women consistently notice it within seconds. Emotional control. Not suppression, not coldness, not distance, but control. The ability to stay grounded when life, people, or circumstances try to pull you into emotional chaos. Now, let's be clear about what this really means. Emotional control is not about pretending nothing affects you. That's not strength, that's denial. Real strength is the ability to feel something fully, but not let it hijack your behavior. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between impulse and awareness, between being led by emotion and leading yourself through emotion. When a man is younger, emotions often run the show. A small rejection feels like a collapse of identity. A disagreement feels like disrespect. A delay in response feels like rejection. Everything is amplified because the internal foundation is still being built. But with maturity, true maturity, not just age, something changes. The emotional storms don't disappear, but the man learns how to stand in the middle of them without losing himself. And this is exactly what women notice. Even if they don't consciously analyze it, they feel it in how you respond under pressure. They see it when something unexpected happens and you don't panic. They observe how you handle disagreement, not with aggression, not with defensiveness, but with composure. That calmness sends a powerful psychological message. This man is not controlled by instability. From an evolutionary perspective, emotional control signals safety. It signals predictability. Not in a boring sense, but in a deeply reassuring sense. A woman doesn't have to wonder how you'll react every time something goes wrong. That uncertainty, the emotional volatility some men carry, creates tension. But emotional stability creates trust. And trust is the foundation of attraction that lasts beyond surface chemistry. But there's something deeper happening here, too. Emotional control is really about self-mastery. It means you are no longer outsourcing your emotional state to external events or other people's behavior. Your mood is not dictated by a text message. Your confidence is not dependent on constant reassurance. Your identity is not shaken by temporary discomfort. This is where most people misunderstand strength. They think strength is intensity, but real strength is regulation. The ability to pause between stimulus and response. That pause is where power lives. Because in that space, you are no longer a victim of reaction. You become the author of your behavior. And when a man operates from that space consistently, his entire presence changes. He becomes less predictable in an emotional sense, but more stable in a relational sense. That combination is rare. He doesn't overreact, but he also doesn't suppress what matters. He communicates clearly. He listens without losing himself. He disagrees without escalating tension. Women pick up on this quickly because many people they encounter in life are emotionally reactive in subtle ways. Quick frustration, passive-aggressive comments, mood swings based on ego. So when they meet a man who remains centered, it stands out immediately. It creates a sense of ease in his presence. And ease is attractive in a world that often feels emotionally chaotic. There's also a philosophical layer to this. Emotional control reflects a deeper understanding of life, that not everything requires a reaction. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every cuss. Ituation deserves your energy. A man who understands this is no longer fighting life. He's navigating it. And that shift alone changes how others experience him. But let me be very direct. This is not about becoming emotionally unavailable. It's about becoming emotionally disciplined. You still feel deeply. You still care. You still engage, but you choose when and how to express those emotions rather than being controlled by them. That distinction is everything. Because uncontrolled emotion creates instability. A controlled emotion creates leadership. And leadership, even in personal relationships, is incredibly attractive, not because it dominates others, but because it demonstrates self-command. So when people say he's calm under pressure, what they're really saying is something much deeper. He trusts himself enough not to collapse when things are uncertain. And that level of self-trust is magnetic. In the end, emotional control is not about restricting life. It's about expanding your capacity to handle it without losing your center. Because the man who can master his emotions doesn't just survive life, he defines how he moves through it. At a certain point in a man's life, attraction stops being about what he does to fit in and starts becoming about who he has decided to be. And this is where a clear sense of identity becomes one of the most powerful psychological signals a man can carry. Because let's be honest, most people are not rejected for who they are. They rejected for not really being anything solid in the first place. They shift, they adjust, they adapt to whoever is in front of them. One moment, they agree just to be liked. The next moment, they change their tone just to avoid conflict. Over time, that creates something very unstable. A man without a center. But when you meet an older man who has developed a clear identity, you feel it instantly. There is a sense of structure to him. He's not performing different versions of himself depending on the audience. He's consistent. Not rigid, not closed off, but consistent. And consistency psychologically creates trust, not just in relationships, but in perception itself. Women notice this immediately, even if they don't consciously define it. They sense when a man is not negotiating his identity in real time. He doesn't change his opinions just to gain approval. He doesn't shift his values just to maintain comfort. He doesn't reshape his personality to avoid being disliked. That kind of internal stability is rare, and rarity always draws attention. Now, what creates this clarity of identity? It's not something you wake up one day and decide to have. It's built through experience, through trial and error, through moments where you realize that pleasing everyone left you empty, through situations where you compromised too much and lost respect for yourself in the process. Over time, those experiences either break a man or refine him. And the ones who are refined him and the ones who are refined begin to understand something critical. Approval is not the same as respect. A man with identity stops chasing approval because he understands its cost. Every time you try to be liked by everyone, you dilute yourself, you blur your edges, you become harder to define, and what cannot be defined cannot be deeply respected. So instead, he begins to build something more valuable: alignment. Alignment between what he believes, how he behaves, and what he allows in his life. This is where attraction starts to shift, because now you are no longer interacting from a place of negotiation. You are interacting from a place of certainty. You know what you stand for, you know what you tolerate, you know what you don't. And that clarity removes confusion from your presence. And confusion, whether people realize it or not, kill. Now that's attraction. If someone has to constantly guess who you are or what you represent, it creates cognitive tension. But when a man is clear, even if he is not universally liked, he becomes easier to understand. And being easy to understand without being easy to access emotionally is a powerful combination. There's also a deeper psychological truth here. People are drawn to those who are not easily shaped by external pressure, because it reflects something they themselves often struggle with. Most people are influenced by environment, opinion, and emotion. So when they meet someone who is not easily swayed, it creates a sense of groundedness they subconsciously respect. But let's take this even further. A clear identity doesn't mean you stop growing. That's a misunderstanding. It means your growth has direction. You're not changing randomly to fit situations. You're evolving in alignment with a core sense of self. That distinction is critical. One is instability disguised as flexibility. The other is evolution rooted in clarity. In relationships, especially with women, this becomes incredibly important because attraction is not just about excitement, it's about orientation. Women are not only drawn to how a man makes them feel in the moment, but also to the sense that he is going somewhere, that he is anchored in something real. A man without identity feels temporary. A man with identity feels intentional. Over time, this identity becomes your reputation without you saying a word. People begin to know what you represent before you even enter the conversation. And that kind of presence doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. So when you strip everything back, this is what identity really is. The courage to be consistent in a world that constantly pressures you to change. And the men who master that no longer need to be accepted to feel valid. They simply need to remain aligned with who they already are. There's a moment in a man's life where words start to matter less and evidence starts to matter more. You can talk about discipline, you can talk about ambition, you can talk about respect, but people don't believe what you say nearly as much as they believe what your life quietly demonstrates. And this is where your lifestyle begins to speak louder than anything you could ever explain. Now, when we talk about lifestyle, we're not talking about luxury. We're not talking about status symbols or external display. We're talking about structure, pattern, consistency, the way you organize your time, the way you treat your body, the way you handle responsibility when no one is watching. These are the real signals people read, especially women, because these are the things you cannot fake for long. A highly attractive older man doesn't need to announce that he is disciplined. You can see it in how he moves through his day. There's a rhythm to him. He doesn't live in chaos. He doesn't constantly react to everything around him. He has systems, even if they're simple. He has order, even if the world around him is unpredictable. And that order creates a silent form of authority. Psychologically, humans are always trying to assess risk. We do it unconsciously. We look for patterns that indicate stability or instability. And lifestyle is one of the strongest indicators of that. A man who sleeps at random times, reacts emotionally to every inconvenience, lacks direction in his daily habits. He creates uncertainty in perception. But a man whose life reflects structure creates calm in others without saying a word. Women notice this especially quickly, not in a calculated way, but in a felt way. They observe how you treat your health. They notice whether you maintain yourself or neglect yourself. They pay attention to whether your environment reflects order or chaos. These details form a silent narrative about who you are when no one is validating you. And here's the deeper truth. Attraction is not built on moments. It is built on patterns. Anyone can have a good moment. Anyone can say the right thing once. But your lifestyle reveals what your normal actually looks like. And people are always more influenced by your normal than your best day. There is also something deeply philosophical about this. Your lifestyle is essentially your habits turned into identity. It is the physical expression of your decisions repeated over time. So when someone looks at your life, they are not just seeing what you do, they are seeing what you have chosen repeatedly. And that repetition either builds respect or erodes it. A man who takes responsibility for his life creates a visible sense of reliability. He doesn't live in extremes. He doesn't oscillate between discipline and collapse. He maintains a baseline of self-respect, and that baseline becomes the foundation of how others experience him. But let's go deeper than surface behavior. Your lifestyle communicates something even more important than success. It communicates self-worth. Because how you live when no one is forcing you reveals how you value yourself internally. Do you take care of your body because you respect yourself? Do you manage your time because you respect your goals? Do you keep your environment in order because you respect your mind? Or do you live in neglect, delay, and disorder, constantly promising change but never building structure? People feel that difference. They may not articulate it, but they respond to it. And this is why lifestyle becomes attraction at scale. It is not about impressing someone in a single interaction. It is about becoming someone whose life is coherent enough that trust builds automatically over time. There is no confusion in your habits, so there is less confusion in how people feel around you. At a certain level of maturity, you realize something important. Your lifestyle is your message, even when you are silent. And that message is either building attraction or weakening it every single day. So when you see a man whose life is owl, who moves with discipline without rigidity, who maintains order without obsession, who balances ambition with presence, you are not just seeing habits. You are seeing self-respect made visible. And in the end, that is what makes a man truly stand out, not what he claims about his life, but what his life consistently proves about him. One of the most underestimated forms of attraction in life is understanding, not surface level observation, not scripted communication, but real psychological understanding, seeing what others feel before they fully express it, and recognizing the patterns behind human behavior. And when a man develops this level of awareness, especially later in life, it becomes one of the most quietly powerful traits he can possess, because most people are not truly seen in their daily lives. They are heard, they are responded to, but rarely understood. Conversations often happen at the level of words, not meaning. But real attraction operates beneath words. It operates in tone, timing, silence, hesitation, energy. And a man who learns to read these layers develops an entirely different kind of intelligence. This is what experience gives you. Not just knowledge about the world, but sensitivity to people. You begin to notice that what someone says is not always what they mean. You recognize when confidence is masking insecurity, when silence is expressing discomfort, when laughter is covering tension, and instead of reacting blindly, you begin to interpret. Now, this doesn't mean you become analytical in a cold or detached way. It means you become perceptive. You're present enough to notice, but grounded enough not to overreact. That balance is rare because most people fall into one of two extremes. They either ignore emotional nuance completely or they become overwhelmed by it. But emotional intelligence sits in the middle, aware but no. Consumed. Women especially notice this ability even if they don't label it consciously. They feel when a man is not just listening to respond, but listening to understand. They feel when a man is not projecting his assumptions onto them, but actually observing them as they are. And that creates a very different dynamic. It creates emotional safety without dependency. Because true understanding removes pressure. When someone feels understood, they don't feel the need to exaggerate themselves. They don't need to perform or defend constantly. They can simply be. And that being state is where genuine connection begins. But let's go deeper into what this really means psychologically. Most people move through life seeking validation of their emotional experience. They want someone to confirm, yes, what you feel is real. When a man can provide that clarity without judgment, without rushing to fix, without dismissing, he becomes emotionally grounding for others. This is not about being agreeable. It's about being aware. You can disagree with someone and still understand them. In fact, real understanding often makes disagreement more respectful, not less. Because you're no longer reacting to distortion, you're responding to truth. And here's where attraction becomes interesting. When a woman feels that a man understands her emotional world, she no longer feels like she has to over-explain herself. She doesn't have to constantly translate her feelings into something acceptable. She feels seen at a level that is rare, and rarity creates depth. Depth creates connection. And connection creates attraction that is not easily replaced. But there is also a responsibility that comes with this level of awareness. Because understanding people gives you influence over how they feel, and that means maturity is required. You don't use insight to manipulate, you use it to connect. You do. Net use awareness to control, you use it to respect complexity. A highly attractive older man doesn't rush to label people or situations. He takes time to observe. He understands that human behavior is layered, not simple. And because of that, he becomes less reactive and more intentional in how he engages. Over time, this creates something very powerful in his presence. Emotional clarity. People feel like they don't have to guess where they stand with him, not because he over-explains everything, but because he communicates with depth and consistency. His understanding of others translates into clearer interactions, fewer misunderstandings, and a calmer emotional environment around him. And in a world where most interactions are rushed, distracted, and surface level, that kind of presence stands out more than words ever could. So when we talk about understanding women on a deeper psychological level, we are not talking about strategy. We are talking about awareness, the ability to see beyond behavior into meaning, to hear what is not said, to recognize what is felt but not expressed. Because at the end of the day, people don't remember every word you said. They remember whether or not they felt understood in your presence. And the man who can give that experience will always be remembered differently. There comes a point in a man's life where attraction is no longer about who he is today alone, but about the direction he is undeniably moving toward. And this is where purpose becomes one of the most powerful forces shaping how others experience him, because purpose changes the energy of a man completely. It shifts him from being reactive to being directional, from existing in moments to building momentum across time. Most people underestimate how deeply others can sense direction. You don't need to announce your goals, and you don't need to constantly talk about your ambitions. People can feel when a man is moving somewhere meaningful. There is a different weight to his presence, a sense that he is not just passing through life, but actively shaping it. And this is especially true for a highly attractive older man, because at that stage of life, what matters is no longer potential. It is trajectory. Potential is noise. Trajectory is evidence. Anyone can claim they will do something someday, but a man with purpose is already in motion. Even if the destination is not fully reached, the direction is clear, and that clarity becomes magnetic. Psychologically, humans are drawn to movement. We are wired to notice progress, growth, evolution. A man who is stagnant, even if comfortable, creates a sense of emotional flatness and perception. But a man who is building something, whether it is his career, his body, his mind, or his impact, creates tension in a positive sense. Not anxiety, but anticipation. People feel that something is unfolding around him. Women are especially sensitive to this. Not in a superficial way, but in a deeply intuitive way. They observe whether a man is expanding or shrinking in his life, whether his days are building towards something or simply repeating themselves. And when they sense expansion, it creates attraction that is tied to imagination. They are not just reacting to who he is, they are responding to who he is becoming. But purpose is not just about ambition. It is not just about achievement or external success. A man can be busy without being purposeful. He can be active without being directed. True purpose has a center. It is anchored in meaning. It is driven by something that feels larger than temporary comfort or validation. And this is where many people misunderstand it. They think purpose is something you declare. In reality, purpose is something you demonstrate through consistency. It shows up in how you structure your time. It shows up in what you say no to. It shows up in what you are willing to endure in the present for a future you believe in. A man without purpose is scattered. His attention moves wherever stimulation is highest. His decisions are reactive. His energy is inconsistent. But a man with purpose becomes selective. He does not engage with everything. He does not chase every distraction. He filters life through direction, not impulse. And that filtering process is where strength becomes visible. Because saying no requires clarity, and clarity requires self-awareness. Most people think attraction comes from adding more words, more effort, more presence, but often it comes from subtraction. From removing everything that does not align with who you are becoming. Over time, purpose gives a man something that cannot be easily imitated: momentum. And momentum is powerful because it carries emotional weight. When someone feels that you are building something that matters to you, they start to associate you with growth itself. And growth is inherently attractive because it represents possibility. There is also a deeper philosophical layer here. Purpose gives structure to identity. Without it, a man is defined by circumstances. With it, he begins to define circumstances. He is no longer shaped entirely by what happens to him, but by what he is actively working toward. That shift alone transforms how he is perceived by others. And perhaps the most important part is this: Purpose stabilizes attraction because excitement without direction fades quickly. But excitement anchored in purpose builds over time. It creates consistency in how others experience you. They don't just see moments of intensity, they see a continuous unfolding of intensity. They see a continuous unfolding. So when people say a man is driven, what they are really sensing is not just ambition. They are sensing orientation, a clear end, vernal compass that guides behavior, decisions, and energy. And that kind of direction is rare enough to stand out, but strong enough to be remembered. In the end, purpose is not about proving your value to the world. It is about becoming so aligned with your direction that your life itself communicates meaning without explanation. Because the man who knows where he is going no longer competes for attention, he naturally attracts it.